Cheering at pro wrestling shows in Japan is back, and 2023 is already shaping up to be a big year in the history of pro res. That's why you should listen to the Emerald Flow Show. From the Royal Road to the Green Mat, Paul and Gerard take you into the world of All Japan Pro Wrestling and Pro Wrestling Noah. Not only do we analyze events, but we examine business, who is getting over, what angles are working or not. Occasionally, we take a look at other Japanese promotions like DDT and Zero One. So if you're looking for more coverage of the world of Japanese wrestling, check out the Emerald Flow Show on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, available on all of your favorite podcast apps.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you brought your A game. Ain't made no lanes on the track when we unite and spit. This is an A game, better bring your A game. Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you brought your A game. Ain't made no lanes on the track when we unite.
And now it's the Mike and JD Show, and I'm your host, Mike Gilbert, and I'm joined this week by a very special guest, call him Mr. Warren Hayes. How you doing, Warren?
I'm very well. Thank you for asking, Mike. Hope you're doing well as well. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Man, we've been actually talking about this for a little bit, and I know JD and I were talking about it last week too. Unfortunately, JD couldn't be here. He, for family reasons. So I just want to give a shout out to JD. JD, we love you, brother. We love the whole Oliva family. And we're sorry for your loss, and we'll hope to get you back on the show here soon, man.
Yep, for real, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. But we'll get right into the show. So actually, Warren, sorry, I'm a little flustered. So typically, we get into a little bit of banter, man. But let's talk about you before we get into the show. Let's introduce you to the audience.
That'll be great banter. I'm super excited. That's the best kind of banter, actually.
Yeah. Let's introduce you to the audience. So, you've been streaming for a long time. You got the Mr. Warren Hayes podcast over on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts at. You've been off for a little bit, man, but you're looking to get back into the game here pretty soon.
I hope so. I've been pretty open about it. I had some impromptu heart surgery at the start of January. Just sitting down eating meatloaf. So I think meatloaf is going to become a banned meal here at the Hayes compound. Yeah. But it's totally unrelated. No, I had they call it a burst aorta, Mike. A ruptured aorta, depending on who you're talking to. So what happens is that your aorta from the inside sort of splits, the side of your aorta sort of splits, so it creates like another canal where the blood keeps pumping but goes nowhere, right? And it's supposed to go to your brain. So what happens if you don't have enough blood that goes to your brain? It's a stroke. So it was a very surprising pain in the chest. And then I hit the bricks and went straight to the emergency ward, and they operated on me and everything was fine. I woke up the next day. And then from that point on, every medical person that I've met since were like, wow, you're really lucky. I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I want to hear this. I appreciate I appreciate the sentiment. I know what you're trying to say, but yeah, it's kind of scary. So I haven't been doing anything. I've still been watching wrestling, but I haven't been doing anything. So when you guys invited me, I was like, oh, well, let's dip our toes. Let's see how it goes. Let's see how my energy levels maintain and whatnot. And so this might be the catalyst, man. This might be the kickoff to the big return.
Well, I hope so. Or it could go. We could really shit the bed. And you're like, you know what? I'm done. So I hope that doesn't happen. So I hope this does get you back into the space, because we need you back. We need somebody to even though CM Punk is not around, we still need to hear your thoughts on CM Punk and all of his shenanigans. You know what I mean?
And you know what was frustrating? I'll tell you what was really frustrating. To have had the operation early January. You've seen it, Mike, and I listen to your show, you and JD. You guys do a fantastic job. You're in my rotation. And all the news that was happening, just like at the start of the year. And I'm sitting, like I'm lying in a hospital bed, I've got shit plugged all over. And then you got the Janelle Grant lawsuit, then you have Scott D'Amore, you've got the Stardom, Rossi leaving, and I'm sitting there, I'm going, can someone bring me a microphone? I got to do something here. It was so frustrating for all of that stuff happening. It was awful. And the CM Punk injury on top of that, the Royal Rumble.
Yeah, dude.
It's sad.
Yeah, honestly, like 2024, I've been podcasting for a few years now, and I gotta say, like, as far as news goes, this has probably been like the wildest year since I've been podcasting. It's been insane.
And it's just a short amount of time. There's just so much stuff happening in a short amount of time. Like it's February now, and I feel like we've been through an entire year cycle of wrestling news when we're not even done.
Yeah. And I always wonder, like, a lot of times I don't even put my notes together now, up until like maybe just like a few hours before the show, because I'm like, so many times I'm about to go live and then something happens and it just kind of blows like all of my notes out of the water. There's there's stories that have happened that I haven't even had the opportunity to cover because like other stuff just kind of took precedence, and I don't want to do a 4-hour podcast. So it's been crazy. But you know what? I think this week, I don't want to say it was a slow week, but it was lots of news have happened. Some stuff happened today. So we're going to cover all of that. And then I want you guys to stick around because Warren and I, so typically when JD and I record on Thursday night, we'll stop the recording after we're done with the Mike and JD show. We'll go take a piss and we'll come back and we'll start a new stream. Stream piss. Okay. Sorry about that. We'll start a new stream. And then
that's why you're on the network.
Yes.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah. So we start a new stream that we typically go to Patreon, and it's like our Mike and JD overtime, right? Overtime with Mike and JD. But tonight, what we're going to do is you're going to get overtime right here on the YouTube channel, right here on Voices of Wrestling YouTube and on the Mike and JD Show YouTube channel. And Warren and I are going to talk about Hulk Hogan versus Sting from 1997 as part of Sting Week, our Sting series. I've been releasing a different podcast a day that JD and I have recorded in the past. So we've done Dangerous Alliance. We did Vader. I think Mick Foley comes out tomorrow. Kurt Angle came out today. We also did Black Scorpion and Ric Flair. And tonight, Warren and I, we're gonna tackle probably it's not his best feud, but I would say his most infamous feud that he ever had was with Hulk Hogan in WCW 1997.
That sounds about right. Like it's well known for all the wrong reasons. We'll get into it later, but it's spoiler alert. It's not a great match, but the ramifications are important. They're tremendous, and they're very indicative of what Sting was dealing with at the time. So very interesting. It'll be fun to talk about.
Absolutely. So thanks everybody for being here. If you're watching on YouTube, whether you're on the Mike and JD Show or YouTube or Voices of Wrestling, please hit the like button and give us a subscribe. I'm sure somebody in the comments tomorrow when I read the comments, because I actually do read the comments, will say, why are you yelling at me to give me a like and a subscribe? Well, because sometimes if people don't tell you, you don't actually think to do it. And I know that's me. Like I never think to hit the like button. So and what that does is it really helps us get into the algorithm a little bit and sends a signal out to other people that are scrolling on YouTube to come check us out. And we would really like it if you guys check this out. And if you do check us out and you do like the show, please head over to patreon.com/the Mike and JD Show for all the bonus content that you could love. It's a good way to support the show. It keeps the lights on, keeps my wife letting me do the show. Let's just say that. Because without it, I don't think I'd be able to anymore. But since we already talked about Sting, did you get a chance to watch Sting from last night's Dynamite, man? How cool was that?
No, man, look, tremendous. How I got shivers. Look, I was very much into WCW at the time, post Bash of the Beach 1996, very much so. So all seeing him rappel down from the top, that was just phenomenal. Like I was hoping that we're going to do it. Then I was like, do you want to do it from Greensboro, which is a big, it's a big arena. It's, but look, this was a smaller venue. They pulled it off. It was tremendous. I was pleased as punch to see that. That was amazing.
Yeah, you know what? It actually took me back to like when I was a kid. Now I'm sure somebody will correct me, but I don't ever remember him doing that his entire tenure in TNA. And he obviously never did it in WWE because they were never going to do that again after what happened to Owen. So just seeing him do that, it kind of like it took me back to, like, as you were saying, back to 1996 to 1998 when he was really at his peak with that Crow character. I absolutely loved it. The crowd went crazy, and then Tony Schiavone with the call of his life, like kind of like halfway losing his voice as he was yelling Sting. And I think also right now we got to give them credit. These two little shits, the Young Bucks. These guys, I think they're doing some of their greatest character work that they've ever done in their career with this heel turn that they did, and the Matthew and Nicholas Jackson, and chasing around Sting. I dig the whole thing, man, and I'm really excited for Sunday.
You couldn't have asked for two guys to lean in more into making the beloved icon even more beloved, if that makes sense, right? In this circumstance, because look, the Jacksons have always been at their best when they're heels, when they're just shitballs. There's a little cursing permitted here, right?
Shit, fuck, balls. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
There you go. So they're really at their best, but they've cranked it up here. They're leaning into every bad thing people say about them online. They're leaning into it right now, and they've absorbed it. They are the characters that people imagine them to be online when they're discussing the Young Bucks. And it's to Sting's advantage here, because you don't want to see these guys win. You want to see Sting and Darby by extension. You want to see them beat the Bucks up. It's going to be a tremendous match. This has been excellently built. I don't think there could have been two better opponents in the AEW sphere than the Bucks to do this, honestly.
Yeah, you know what? So my original idea, because I always book everything like myself, and then I'm like one of those guys that gets mad when they don't use my ideas that they didn't know about. Like one of those fans. And so my idea was Sting versus Samoa Joe for the world title. Okay. And I thought that would have been great. And it would have been kind of like an ode to their, they had a match at TNA at Bound for Glory years ago, and Samoa Joe broke his butthole on a drop kick on the outside where he slammed on the stairs. So that's what I was thinking, like main event Samoa Joe versus Sting. Sting's always done a really good job against bigger opponents. We just covered like his rivalry with Vader and Cactus Jack, and so I was like, oh, that would be perfect. And then Tony Khan just totally kills my idea with something that was just way better. And him and Darby winning the tag titles, and then headlining Revolution against the Young Bucks. I don't think you're right. That was much better than my idea. I think they knocked it out of the park with this. My
stupid idea was against Darby, just like having a passing of the torch kind of thing or whatever. A celebratory match of their union. It's just like, well, let's. I'm on my way out. And look, everything that Sting has said about Darby Allin has been highly complimentary. He even brought him to Japan to do the Muda, the Great Muda matches. Clearly Sting and Darby have a legitimate connection. I think they get along very well. And I thought that, have Darby and Sting go at it. I would have been into that. But I'm into this, like you. I'm into this much more. I think this is tremendous.
Yeah, rarely does a booker book something better than what I booked in my head, because I have a bias about what my ideas are. But no, I think Tony Khan nailed it. So okay, so let's give Warren the book for Revolution on Sunday. How does it end?
The Bucks win.
The Bucks win. Okay, so you're putting the Bucks over no matter what. Okay.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, look, listen. The Bucks. Here's the thing, and I am convinced that Sting is going to do this. He's old school. He believes in the classics. He's going to lie down. He's going to do the job because the Bucks have to continue after this. The Bucks have to continue being the shitballs that they are right now. they could not become bigger shitballs than pinning the Icon Sting, not Darby, pinning Sting flat on his back and taking the titles, coming into Dynamite on Wednesday with the belts and whatever other paraphernalia they're going to use during the match. This would, not unlike the suits with the blood that they've been keeping. To me, there's no other outcome than this. Like, people wanting Sting to win, I get it, but I think Sting is. I think he's well. Not only I know he's old school. I think he's going to want to do the old school thing, and that is go out on leave the territory on your back, and because I think he understands that these guys have to continue. They have to continue moving forward. I love this persona of the Bucks so much. It has to be. They have to become even worse.
Yeah, I agree with you. There is a part of me that would kind of like to see Sting get that send off, like kind of like Vern Gagne did back in the day and Fritz von Erich did, where like the conquering hero, they retired as
Kazuchika Okada.
Yeah, Kazuchika Okada. So there is that part, like that little kid that still lives inside of me that Sting is like. I never call Sting Superman because to me he's always been Batman. Like I've always seen him as like Batman, right? The Dark Knight character. I think they're synonymous, right? Mm-hmm. But I completely agree with you. This is just pro wrestling. I think if Tony Khan and the Young Bucks even presented Sting with the idea that he would win and not drop the titles, he would look at them like they're crazy. Like he'd be like, absolutely not. There's no way I'm not getting pinned. You guys are like, he hasn't been beaten his entire run here. He's like, you guys have to pin me. This is the only way it works.
Exactly. And then you have Matt and Nick saying, we are the only people who pin Sting. They have that on top of everything just to continuously piss people off. No, I'm way too much into this into this run from the Bucks right now for that outcome to not happen.
Absolutely. And then you can have like a tag team coming up to defend Sting's honor against the Young Bucks. Kind of like what, if you remember back when Shawn Michaels retired Ric Flair with one of Ric Flair's retirements, like Batista did that. So but they leaned into a Batista-Shawn Michaels feud right after that. And I thought that one did pretty well. And I thought that was a pretty good story. So they could even do that. I don't know that, FTR would be the guys for that. They're my favorites. So I think that would be cool. But I think that they could actually elevate another young tag team up to defend the honor of Sting and chasing the Young Bucks. I think that would be cool too.
That would be that'd be a very good idea. For all the reasons that you just pointed out right there, Mike, I think that Sting understands that, and he understands that this company, these people are going to have to continue without him.
Yeah,
and might as well just, as they like to say, do the right thing, go out on your back, and just. Now you can make an argument that the Young Bucks need this? They don't need it, but it's going to be great though. Do the Young Bucks need it? No. Does AEW need the Young Bucks to be molten hot? I think they do, because I think they do.
Look, outside of certain markets, their ticket sales are not doing great. Ratings are doing fine. Pay-per-views are doing fine, but their arena business is a little bit down right now. So I think that getting the Young Bucks as hot as possible, the Young Bucks being like, founders of the company, two of their biggest stars. I would say, yeah, absolutely. I think AEW needs the Young Bucks to get hot like this, Yeah,
no, you could make, if someone wanted to make me an argument of, in regards to the Bucks not really hitting the heights, so far in their entire AEW tenure, sure, I'd get behind that. When were the Young Bucks like really hot? Like you said, you use the word molten. When were the Young Bucks previously in their AEW career molten hot? Doesn't really come to mind.
they've never been the top act in the company. And I think that's always been kind of like, from a guy like me that was a big fan of, I'm still a big fan of theirs, obviously. I always thought, you know, AEW kind of sold themselves on like tag teams getting opportunities to like main event pay-per-views and being top acts. And it's just never really happened. I know Ring of Honor, they main evented a couple, like FTR and the Briscoes main evented, but you just haven't seen that in AEW. So I thought that the Young Bucks would kind of would be that for this company, and they never really got there. And I think if they can get some heat off of this deal, maybe they do get there.
I agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go to the chat. We got a lot of people on the chat. Let's see. Sports and Things. It says, hey, Mike and Warren, new to the show, came here via Warren. So thank you, Warren. I appreciate that. And thank you, Sports and Things.
That's our boy, Carlos.
Carlos. Thank you. Welcome, Carlos. And then Dobby the Brain Heenan. So, whoa, Mr. Hayes in the house tonight. And then our guy, James Oliva. I got so freaked out when he told me his name was actually James. I was like, dude, I thought it was JD on your birth certificate. My bad. But JD watching at home. God bless you, JD. We're glad you're here. And then, of course, John Muse in the house. What's up, John? He's probably going to shut all over my booking ideas I just had. And then Kristen Ashley. Kristen, thank you for being here. Really appreciate you. She says, hello. And then we got Shrey in the house. Shrey says that the heat the Young Bucks going to be nuclear if they win. Absolutely.
And the discourse, it's going to be
beautiful. Yeah, Jim Cornette's going to get like 10 videos out of it.
In a day.
And then JD's back says, how fitting is it the week Ole died this week? It's on Sting week. Yes. Absolutely. Ole, who booked the absolute dirt worst feud angle for Sting in the history of his career. I would say even worse than like some of the TNA stuff was the Black Scorpion angle that was booked by Ole. Was absolutely tanked his career for a little bit. And that's a shame. But yeah, rest in peace, Ole Anderson. I know over on the flagship, they did, what would you say, like 90 minutes over on the flagship about Ole. 90 minutes. Yeah. So I'm not going to give like a complete synopsis of his career, but I've been actually watching a lot of Ole lately because just randomly I found this 1982 Mid-Atlantic YouTube playlist. Like they just have a random playlist, and I think they're just like stealing content from WWE and they're just getting away with it. So kudos to you guys. So they're uploading it, and I started watching it, and like they're in a feud right now. Like Ole Anderson and his tag team partner Stan Hansen are on there, and they're feuding with guys like Ray Stevens and the Boogie Woogie Man and all these other dudes in Mid-Atlantic at the time. And it's like, damn, man, Ole can promo his ass off, and him and Stan were a hell of a tag team.
Well, I mean, Ole was. I think Ole Anderson. We have a tendency to talk about his attitude and his outstanding booking ideas, but he was. I think a lot of people would be surprised at how good a worker he was to begin with, and as a promo, he was tremendous. He really, really was tremendous. He was the heat magnet. The promo he cut after turning on Dusty, right? The big Dusty Ole feud, right? That was the thing that just ignited this entire feud. He was a tremendous promo, and he was a strong worker. I think a lot of people would be surprised at how good he was, especially for the time.
And I think his reputation kind of clouds just kind of how really great he was. And like a lot of people, pro wrestling just ended up passing him by the time 1990 rolls around and WCW hires him as the booker. He'd kind of lost his fastball there, and he probably very much wanted to get out of pro wrestling at that point anyway, but it was kind of a job to him. But he was around for a long time. He was a big time wrestler out of Minnesota for a long time, trained with Vern Gagne. He went over. I know he was the booker for Georgia. He booked Mid-Atlantic, he obviously booked WCW. But he had some really, really great years in Mid-Atlantic and in Georgia as like their top booker. And he ran like two of the top territories at the same time for a lot of his career. And so he does really get. I think he doesn't get a ton of credit for that because I think his attitude and his failures are kind of like have outweighed his successes in a lot of people's minds.
Yeah, I mean, you can go back and read some stories. He was observably a racist. On top of it all,
Yes.
there's a lot of stuff that you can attribute to Ole that sort of wants you sort of that sort of tempers whatever excitement you might feel about his in the entirety of his work. But coupled with the stories that you hear about how much of a just a bad attitude he had, just about how just a nasty, grumpy, cranky old man. But then again, it's pro wrestling in the 80s, right? He was he was there for Black Saturday, right? When the Briscoes and the other guy, was Jim it Barnett? Yeah. When they in the cover of the night sold GCW, not that GCW, Georgia Championship Wrestling, to Vince McMahon without him knowing. You can understand maybe how he was a little, might be a little cranky, might be a little off-putting when he does even his business partners, he can't trust them, right? I'm not trying to defend the guy by any means, but just trying to paint a picture as to why maybe he was like this. There's definitely examples you can point to.
Well, he probably got screwed over by a lot of people. So, it's a con man business made up of people kind of trying to screw each other over and get a leg up on their competition at all times. And he was obviously caught up in that. If you guys do get an opportunity, go check out the Lapsed Fans Black Saturday series. And they do a really good job of breaking that entire thing down. You get kind of a complete picture of just who Ole Anderson is, because they pull out his book and they read excerpts from the book, and he talks a lot about his successes and his failures. And of course, he doesn't take any accountability for the failures. If right now he's probably up, he got to the pearly gates and cuts a promo in St. Peter. He gets into heaven and says, "This place is the shits." He's like one of those guys.
Why isn't Flair here?
Yeah, he's probably like still saying, "Look, I told everybody Flair sucked. He never was a draw. Hogan sucked. He could never draw. He only." I remember, and I want to pull this up. I think this absolutely encapsulates a lot of Ole Anderson's character, and he really reminds me of my grandpa. And funny thing is, they're like the same age too. And they're both gone, God rest their souls. But so I did a screen recording thing of Ole on arguing with Dave Meltzer. It's one of the greatest things. So if you just Google Ole Anderson argues with Dave Meltzer, you'll see the clips pop up. But I wanted to play this little quick clip right here, which very much like tells you exactly who Ole Anderson is. It's hilarious.
Well, so I mean, if there were 1,000 of them,
have to disagree about everything, because there's more Hulk Hogans out there than you can possibly imagine, but nobody's looking for them.
How come nobody can find them?
Who's looking for them?
Well, I think that everyone in wrestling should be looking for them, because God knows they need to make new stars. We all know that.
I got rid of Hulk Hogan.
I know you did, which is an interesting.
Well, if you think he was so good, I guess you must think I'm the dumbest guy in the world to get rid of him.
I didn't say that.
Well, I think the story is that they had him on. Dave had him on. He was supposed to sell some books, right? I think he was out there to promote his book, but he didn't even talk about his book. He just spent his time arguing with Dave.
Yeah, because he thought he was going to go on there and own Dave. And like, depending on who you talk to, like people that don't like Dave will say, "Oh yeah, Ole absolutely owned Dave." But then when you actually hear it, it's like, in no way did that ever happen. In fact, and right there, that clip just showed you. And I know this is like a kind of an out of context 26-second clip, so you can go check it out for yourself. But very much, I thought Dave held his own in that argument. And him saying, "Well, I didn't say that." Like, that was Dave's way of saying, "Yeah, you are an idiot because you thought that Hulk Hogan could not draw." And so the point that Ole was trying to make was that Hogan couldn't draw in his territory because he was too big, and he wouldn't be able to draw in the same towns every single night. But he had to go to WWE, and he had to go to Vern with these big territories and these big cities to where they didn't see him every week, so he would draw better. But he was like, well, outside of Vince and outside of Vern, he never drew. And then Dave had the argument, was like, well, actually, he drew in WCW too. He's like, oh, he did? I didn't know that. So that just tells you exactly who Ole Anderson is. But one of my favorite stories, and if you guys ever do get a chance, check out the Death of the Territories book too. I think that's a great read for all you wrestling historians out there. If you have not read that book, you need to go out of your way to check it out. But the scene in the early 80s when they're at the NWA convention, and Ole essentially is challenging Vince McMahon. He like stands up and like starts screaming and cussing at Vince. And in my head, like, I want JD to write the book, or I want JD to write like the television series. Like that's like the beginning of a television show, like this big war between Ole Anderson and Vince McMahon, like the North versus the South, and Vince like this Northern like mobster type guy, and like Ole's like this Southern hillbilly, even though he's from Minnesota. But like in my head, that's like how you would do the series, and they're kind of fighting over these two big wrestling territories and trying to grow their business. I think that's great, and I think Ole's last interaction with Vince McMahon, I think will garner him a lot of respect, considering what we know about Vince now and what a lot of us have known. So here's a clip from like a shoot interview that Ole said his own unique way of greeting Vince and Linda McMahon.
The same fucking thing. He came back a couple of weeks after that. No, it was the third week he came back. That's what it was. And he said, "I got my wife with me. I'd like you to say hello to Linda," I think her name was. I said, "Fuck her and fuck you."
So that's Ole
So
Anderson in a nutshell. What a hero.
That's so good. And you I don't have anything to add really. Like that's pretty much it. But you did talk about the Tim Hornbaker book, right?
Yeah.
Death of the Territories. You said for wrestling historians. I think this is required reading for any modern wrestling fan who just you just need to understand where all this stuff comes from. When Triple H says that WWE, brought wrestling out of the smoky bars and whatnot. No. There's stuff that every wrestling fan should understand. It's a tremendous book. It's a great read. And it's a great historical perspective on how wrestling existed and how it thrived, and ultimately how WWE did more harm than good. So it's really required reading, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. Everybody go check that book out. We got some more sad news. Our man Virgil, Soul Train Mike Jones, he died. Was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday. Yeah, he died. I think he passed away yesterday. And as a kid, he was a big star to me as like the $1 Million Man's kind of his servant deal. And then I thought the big turn that he did against $1 Million Man was pretty cool. He never really did much after that. I know he was in the NWO for a while. Everything about him was kind of like just petty spoofs, as Dave was talking about on Wrestling Observer Radio. But I think he'll always be remembered, not only for his run with the $1 Million Man, but for him kind of being like a modern carny, just setting up shop anywhere there might be wrestling fans, and selling autographs. And to that, I say respect to you, sir, and rest in peace, Mike Jones, aka Virgil.
You got to respect the hustle. Yeah, I mean, listen, this is a guy, you don't want to speak ill of the dead, but facts are facts. No. He was not a good pro wrestler. But the role that he had, like, me and myself as a kid, I don't know what our age gap is between the two of us, but it's the same thing. Virgil, when the turn happened on Ted DiBiase, it was the biggest thing in the company. Like this, he immediately became red hot. This is something that had been simmering practically from the moment he was introduced. And when it finally happened, I mean, you still have you still have those feelings imprinted in you. It's like, from the day Virgil decided to move on, and he was a big deal for a while. Very short while, but he, eventually, he shows up, in the Royal Rumble because they need 30 guys, and that's pretty much it. And he does the jump to WCW, becomes Vincent, and that was not a mistake. I don't know if I don't know if everyone knows the story, but they'd called him Virgil or Vince had called him Virgil in WWE because that's Dusty's real name. His name was Virgil. So then when he shipped over to WWE to WCW, started calling him Vincent. So ribs upon ribs.
Good for him getting a job just to pull a rib on Vince McMahon. He probably got paid like $6 figures a year, just because Hogan and Bischoff were being petty. And I think that's tremendous.
But he came in he came in to be the job guy, right? Because when you think about the guys who were in there at the time, you had the original three, Nash and Hogan. They're not jobbing to just about anyone. They had Sean Waltman in there at the time too, right? DiBiase was there. That was the Giant too, right? All guys that but Waltman was the NWO cruiserweight guy, right?
Yeah,
all guys that didn't necessarily want to be taking falls. Their names, they're stars. They've got their egos, so it's the continuation. It's the logical continuation of the Virgil bodyguard thing, where he just takes the bumps for the stars. That's all he needed to do. That was his role, and good for him. Yeah, good for him. He parlayed that into a lot of paydays, like the rest of his life.
I actually he
was on a lot of pay-per-views, man. He was on a lot of pay-per-views.
Yeah, he was. He was around for, and if you think about it, he was in WWF at their peak, right before the Attitude Era. So like the pre-Attitude Era peak, talking like late 80s, early 90s. I think they kind of finished him off like with that Yokozuna angle where Yokozuna murdered him, and like he was like telling Brett, stay away from that man, Brett. Like I remember that angle like it was yesterday.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah, I remember that now. Okay.
Like then he was in the peak WCW. Yeah. So he was in like two different like very successful eras, and he not really like a top character, but he was like a character in two major eras. Now I did get a chance to meet Virgil. He came to Japan, I want to say in 2006 when I was stationed there, and on a USO tour. So they actually had like a wrestling show on the base there at Yokota Air Base, Japan. Him, Disco Inferno, and Screamin' Norman Smiley himself, Black Magic. But he was like full like Screamin' Norman gimmick, because he hadn't went to go be a trainer in WWE yet. So they all came out, and I just remember like they had like the picture line where they had like photos made up, and they didn't charge anything because it was all military. So like the USO took care of everything. So everybody got a picture with a wrestler. You got like they had like a photo with all of the wrestlers' pictures on it, and then the wrestlers would just sign by their headshot, right? That was on like the one photo that you would get. Okay. So I remember he was like first in line, and I was a heavy drinker back then, and I had like a yard of beer, right? It's like a 3-foot tall like beer glass, right? And it was just like filled with beer, and it was like wrapped around my neck. I had like a lanyard, and I remember going up to him, and he's like, hey sir, would you mind putting that beer down? I don't want to be photographed with people drinking. And I was just like, this is Virgil, right? In my head, I was like, yes, sir. So I hand my beer to my friend, and I actually take the picture, and he couldn't have been a nicer guy. And then I go down the line, and like Norman Smiley signing, and like they had some indie guys who I didn't know who they were. I don't think they ever made it. Like they were signing stuff. And I get down to the end of the line at Disco, and he's just like reading a magazine. And he looks up at me, he's like, hey man, and then just signs it. And then he's like, next. And I was like, he was such a dick to me. I was like, what the hell? But Virgil, like of all people, was like the nicest guy in that whole line. I thought he was fantastic.
Testament to both guys, really. It just makes perfect sense. Disco would just like give you a side glance from like, all right, hey, how you doing?
That was essentially what he did. And lastly on the RIP section of the podcast, and I hope to not do too many of these, but a few weeks ago, JD and we were recording Overtime, and I think we were getting ready to do the Dangerous Alliance podcast that we were doing. And but before that, like right before we were about to go on air, Rossi Ogawa got fired from Stardom. And right after Rossi got fired, Tony Khan took to Twitter and was like making fun of Rossi, and he posted a GIF of Curb Your Enthusiasm with Larry David and Richard Lewis. So I go on and I pull up the GIF because that's how we do it. Like I pull up the tweet And it says, and I said, and here's Tony Khan making fun of Rossi using a GIF of Larry David and the late great Richard Lewis. Now this was a few weeks ago, and JD goes, Richard Lewis is dead, and I go, I think so. I was like, hold on, shit, let me look that up. So I go online and I was like, oh shit, no, it wasn't him. And we just start laughing our ass like we're howling at this point. It's like, because Mike's basically because I'm an idiot. And then what happened was, and like I clipped it for YouTube. I'm not going to share it right now because I think it's kind of scummy to do that to watch it again. But what happened? Like I didn't clip this part, but like the longer version of that clip was I had come to the conclusion that I got him mixed up with Richard Belzer. Because they're comedians from like the same era. They're from the East Coast. You know, they did Howard Stern a lot back in the day, both guys. But I know that they're completely different people, but I just got them mixed up in the moment, right? And so we had a good laugh about that. And, I felt kind of bad about it. And then, of course, the man had to go ahead and die. I think he died today, didn't he? Was it today or yesterday? I can't remember. I think it was last night.
Yeah, I think it was yesterday. It was the same day as Virgil. It was yesterday.
Yeah, it was yesterday. So I got a little bit of egg on my face, but I do got to say, he was a brilliant comedian. I really was a fan of his, and I really liked watching his stand up back in the day. And I always had a really fun time watching him on the late night shows. He did Leno a lot when I was a kid, and he was always on the Howard Stern show, and that's kind of probably where like my best frame of reference for his comedy is. And then of course he was in Robin Hood Men in Tights, and I just loved his performance in that movie. So I just want to give a shout out to, rest in peace Richard Lewis, a comedic genius. I didn't know that he had Parkinson's disease when I said that, so also it kind of makes me look like a scumbag, but that was not intentional, clearly. So it was just kind of a funny accident. But just a rest in peace to the man, the king of pain himself, Richard Lewis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I was a big fan as well. I like the neurotic aspect of his comedy, which that was very fresh. I look up here in Canada, we didn't get Stern, so there was no way for me to get that kind of exposure. But he had a sitcom. He had a couple, but he had one with Jamie Lee Curtis. That was called,
really?
That was called Anything But Love, and she was a freshly divorcee, rebuilding her life, moving to Chicago, and she's on a plane with this neurotic columnist for whatever paper or magazine, and she wants to be a writer, so he helps her get a job at his publication, and it just so happens that they decide that they share an apartment. He says, well, whatever, and my memory doesn't tell me that this was hilarious or great. Nothing sticks, but nonetheless, I saw, how he would deliver, how he would perform. And I thought that was a lot of fun. And looking back, you're like, geez, this is with Jamie Lee Curtis on top of that. Couldn't have been that bad, right? You'd have to dig those up somewhere.
It might be worth like another look, because he's one of those guys that's a little bit ahead of his time. And I think he actually found like the perfect role for him in Curb Your Enthusiasm. So like it just took a long time for him to get there. Not that he wasn't a big comedian, because he really, like in the late 80s, early 90s, like Richard Lewis was a very big comedian. Him and Belzer and Richard Jenny and Sam Kinison and all those guys from that era, they were huge and selling out big shows. So
Carlin, Lily Tomlin, and I think one of his trademarks was making fun of his sexual exploits, how he would underperform in bed when everyone else was doing the exact opposite. He was like, no, I tried and it didn't work. And whatever.
Yeah, because like Eddie Murphy was like the complete opposite, where he was like kind of like bragging about how great he was and all that, and then here you got Richard Lewis, the complete opposite. So. Rest in peace, Richard Lewis. Funny guy. Sorry to see him go. But look, we got some more news here. Let's let's go ahead and get into. Should we get into Maxine Dupree?
Oh God, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So Maxine Dupree, I'm not gonna play the clip. I was gonna play it, but I was like, I just don't think it's worth it. But so she had a match at a house show over the weekend, and everybody was like booing her because the match just wasn't very good, and which is pretty typical behavior in a pro wrestling show. Like that's pretty typical behavior in like sports in general, right? Like, rookies go on the field and they fumble the football. They get heat for that, right? To this day, I have a resentment against Kyle Williams from the 49ers from a fumble that he had in the NFC Championship game against the Giants like 20 years ago. Like I get it. So like this is show business is a tough business and you're going to get heckled, right? So if you're in comedy, if it's music, it's acting, it's pro wrestling. But to her credit, I haven't actually seen her complain about it. It's just some of her peers are kind of coming to her defense a little bit, but I'm like, I think if you walk through this and, you're able to, use it as fuel for you, you might actually get better. I would say embrace this moment and let it feed you and fuel you to go stick it in their face next time. Sorry, I got a little tangent.
No, that's fine. Look, I think that if Rhea Ripley and the rest did not come to her defense, we wouldn't be talking about this. This would have been like some Twitter rando, deciding to go down the positivity train and saying, can we all just get along? You're like, all right, whatever, but the fact is this is the thing that Rhea Ripley was going out there. I didn't see anyone else, any other wrestlers come to Dupree's defense. But I saw the Rhea Ripley one, and what did she do? She blamed the fans, which is the tried and true WWE formula. We've seen it employed by the likes of Seth Rollins in the past, and so on and so forth. Like this is nothing new. Triple H with his "me and my friend Mark," like this is not new. It's the fans' fault if this is happening, right? When in reality, we could be pointing the finger at the company for putting this woman who has, from what I understand, at that time, had 13 professional wrestling matches in her entire wrestling career. She had not wrestled a single wrestling match before being hired by WWE. Now we're tossing her out there. We're expecting her to perform when you have a performance center where you could be sending this woman to train. You have an entire developmental brand to make sure that she gets her reps and that she's able to improve on her time and get paid to work out, to do the classes and whatnot. Instead, they're just throwing her into the deep end, right? Yeah. And there's a lot of fault to be put upon the company. Now, that being said, I want to make this very clear. Maxine Dupree stinks. She has no instincts. She doesn't get it. I watched one of her matches a couple of weeks ago where she's doing one of these, right? And she's bouncing back and forth like she's supposed to be a fighter, right? But she has no footwork. She's literally just hopping forward and backward. She's got nothing. She doesn't even have the instincts to do this. You can compare her to, young kids coming up on the indies or in AEW, but at some point, even if they're green as grass, you're able to see, right, Mike? You're able to see. Oh, they got something there. They may not be a polished product, but there's something to mold here. You can feel it. This woman has nothing. She can't even talk. She's got nothing to give. And again, this is the company's problem, because if they had put her in the PC and have her do some reps, they would have realized that she has nothing and would have kept her off TV in the first place.
Yeah, because when they brought her up, she was just a manager, right? So she never really had like a run where she was doing matches. Because, at the PC, don't they do some like towns in like Florida, like kind of do like whatever it is, like a loop in Florida? She never really got an opportunity to do that. They brought her immediately right up to be with the Maximum Male Models, and that whole thing didn't work out. And now they're trying to, just throw her into the deep end, and that's just not fair to her.
It's not cool. Honestly, it's not cool.
it's not cool. I'm not going to blame the people in the audience as long as you're not saying anything sexist, racist, homophobic, anything like that. I would say it's fair game. And if you think that a person stinks, you should be able to say it. There's a way to do it. You don't have to be like completely rude, right? I think we're past the days of die Rocky die, but look at what happened to The Rock after that, right? He used that as fuel and he ended up getting better. I think that they were trying to put her in the big arena shows and she's just not ready yet, and that's what happened. And now she's got a bunch of people coming to her defense. And I get why you would want to protect one of your coworkers, right? Like that's like your friend and maybe their feelings are hurt. You want to come to their defense, but really you should be pointing the finger elsewhere. It's probably the people that put her in that position in the first place.
Then why do you go after the fans? This is always a weird ass strategy. Don't go after the fans. It's so stupid and every single time. And look, she's not ready. She had 3 spots in the Royal Rumble, Mike. She blew all 3. Like she's not supposed to be doing this. Yeah. It's not even a question of, oh, well, I don't think she has it. I don't think she has the stuff to be a pro wrestler to begin with. And look, if I'm paying, look, the house shows aren't $20. WWE house shows aren't $20. A house show came to my town in August last year. I was looking at the ticket prices. They're not as crazy as tapings, but they're high up there. If I'm sitting there, if I paid, I'm at a wrestling show, I paid to see a show and I think something stinks, I'm going to boo it. I paid this ticket and I'm being given stuff that is underwhelming, that is underperforming. Yeah, I'm going to let you know that this is awful. Because I don't want you to do it again.
Yeah.
That's
really
I've seen it. Wrestling works.
I've seen it at comedy shows and I've seen it at concerts, where like the big band will come in and like they will bring in like a few of the local bands to warm up the crowd before the major band comes into town. And sometimes those bands stink and they're just not ready to be playing in front of an audience like that. They freeze up in the moment, or maybe they're just not good at all, right? And that happens, but you got to be prepared for that moment.
For real. I've done improv, not with Colt Cabana, mind you, but I've done improv. I mean, it's the kind of thing that inevitably happens, Yeah. It just happens. You just have to deal with it. You roll with it. You learn from it, but you don't go, don't boo. Fans are weird. Wrestling fans are weird, particularly on Twitter. It's bizarre to me.
Yeah. All right, let's go rapid fire because I really do want to get to Sting versus Hogan. This one really shocked me, Warren. It turns out Matt Riddle was doing cocaine while he was in WWE.
What? What?
Honestly, it would shock me if he wasn't doing cocaine. Yeah.
That would have been the story. I tested positive. I tested negative for cocaine. Yeah. I mean, what else is there to say?
Water is wet and the sky is blue. This came out earlier in the week. It's something we've been covered for a long time. We're glad that it's over. The number finally got released from MLW's lawsuit against WWE because WWE was guilty of tortious interference and tampering and all the other shady things that they were doing. MLW was awarded $20 million, which is far more than what that company is worth. Man, that is a good haul for old Court Bauer. No wonder Kojima is the champion. And then tonight on their show, they had Mystico versus Rocky Romero, like as one of their top matches.
Yeah, this was settled in December, right? And then all of a sudden they're getting, then all of a sudden, like you said, you got the CMLL guys coming in. You got you've got Kojima coming in. This is why. Will they be able to continue investing in talent moving forward? I hope so. But I kind of feel I don't know. MLW is one of these wrestling companies that I don't know how they make money. I really don't understand how they're still afloat. I don't get it. I really don't.
Yeah. I think Court's got family money.
Probably, but listen, it just doesn't make sense to me. I feel like they needed this. Good for them, I guess.
Hey, good for them. They got one over on the WWE, so hey, that's a win for everybody. Speaking of not making any money, TNA looks like they might be going live eventually. At least that was what Scott DeNo was planning before he got ousted. But Dave brought it up on Wrestling Observer Radio earlier this week, and it looks like that might actually still be in play. TNA possibly moving to Full Sail University, which is where NXT used to record, and the whole live thing just doesn't really make any sense to me whatsoever. Like, I could see them going back to like Orlando, like the Impact Zone or Full Sail or whatever, and doing their tapings there, because I think that since they left there, like the show, like the production quality's gotten a lot worse because they're on the road. It costs extra money to drag all that equipment around. I could see them actually going back there, and I always thought that the NXT from Full Sail was always really good. So, like, as long as you put good stuff in front of that audience, they're going to be excited for it. So that makes sense to me. But them going live every single week makes absolutely no sense to me. It
doesn't make, yeah, especially when you consider that NXT back in the day was taped. They taped a full month's worth of stuff and then went with it. No, it doesn't make any sense to me. You're raising your costs rather exponentially. Probably the wrestlers would be excited about it because they don't have to travel. They can just like hunker in and buy a condo, whatever.
Well, and a lot of those guys are on like per date deals, and so what you're doing is you're doubling their amount of dates. So yeah, they would be really excited, but you're also doubling the cost. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't understand what they're doing. I kind of feel like it's a situation where they see WWE, they see AEW, and they're saying, and they're going like, hey, we can do the live thing too. Networks like the live thing. The for the media rights, everyone likes the live aspect. Well, we can do live as well. I think it's a Me Too kind of situation.
Yeah, totally feel you. But I have some TNA fans in the chat, especially my buddy IO Productions. Shout out IO. So there was this rumor going around that when Scott D'Amore got fired, that this new guy, Anthony Chon, as I like to call him, was coming in to like slash the budget. And them still thinking about going live, them returning to the Palms, them offering Josh Alexander a new contract that would obviously be more than what he's making now. And the fact that they just signed Alexander Hammerstone and they made that announcement tonight, doesn't that kind of throw a little bit of cold water on the fact that they might be slashing their budget dramatically, which is what we were led to believe in the beginning?
I think we have, look, if I'm talent, I'm worried at all of this, because just because they're re-upping Josh Alexander, who is quite arguably their most valuable asset as far as talent goes, in my opinion, that makes sense. This is the kind of guy that you make room in your budget for to hang on to. Bringing Hammerstone in, look, Hammerstone, good for him. Like he looks like a star. He's tremendous. Look. There's a lot of good things out of this signing. I think he's going to be a great fit in TNA. I would, if I'm on the lower end of the card, I'm a little worried about the status of my contract. That's what I'm kind of a little antsy on. If they're talking about doing all these expenditures on production and then bringing in this, new guys, and let's not forget Mustafa Ali is around as well, and he's not working for cheap. I wouldn't be surprised, man, if within the next couple of months there's a roster purge that happens in TNA. I really wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, and I think I've seen some people say that maybe with like contracts expiring, like they would just kind of let people go through attrition, because they do have like a lot of like middle-aged WWE fired talent on their roster, like Big Con and Dirty Dango, and Rhino's still there. Like I could see guys like that, like kind of exiting the company, because I think that you could easily replace them with cheaper indie talent. Like, sure. And I think that would be smart anyway. Get rid of those guys anyway, and bring in like younger, hungry, more affordable talent that's more budget friendly for you. I think that would just be a good idea. I think a lot of those people were just friends with Scott D'Amore, so he's keeping them around.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. do we use the term redundancy when it comes to these types of talents, or what? Because I feel like there is, there is redundancy. I don't think everyone's going to have a job by the end of the year in TNA. I really don't.
Yeah. So lastly, CMLL visa issues. I am very disappointed in this story. There's I think 15, 16 guys from CMLL, they got their visas canceled. I was really hoping that this was Conan. That would just be like my Christmas. Like Conan finally got one over on CMLL and got some revenge against AEW for a lot of the heat that's there. But as it turns out, it's a different indie promoter in Texas, and is actually CMLL saying, "No, guys, don't worry, we got this. We don't need your help." And seems like CMLL is actually the ones that screwed this whole thing up.
Yeah. See, from what Cubs fan is reporting, the CMLL absolutely screwed the pooch on this one. There's no other way to, the guy was receiving calls from Homeland Security and saying, well, there's a potential for fraud here if you go through with this. It's okay, then never mind. I'm like, I'm not going to bat for this. But it's a shame because this is a process that could take a while. It puts WrestleMania week up in the air for all of the shows that had contracted CMLL talent. Forbidden Door is in question as well. The appearances for New Japan Strong. So it just sucks. But they could all come to Canada though. We don't care about these work visas. You can come up here and work.
Absolutely. And you can basically work there as long as you want, essentially. So you don't have to cut through all the red tape. It's really hard to get across the border there in Canada. Maybe if you're just an American, but if you're coming from other places, you're probably just fine. All right. So thanks guys for watching the news portion of the show. We're going to get over to our Sting and Hogan coverage. But before I do, I want to go back to the chat really quick. King of the North says, please clip Mike saying, speaking of not making money, TNA. Trust me, brother. I already had that one planned. That's definitely happening. I think Io was talking about TNA made some money. I don't see where it was at in the chat, but yeah. So TNA did make some money off of the Hard to Kill show. I mean, they had 30,000 pay-per-view buys, and they had their most ticket sales they've had in 10 years. And their budget's not that big. I would assume that they made some money off of that deal. I would assume it's not all just gross. They probably have some net profit there too, considering how many pay-per-views they did. Adam Coral, much love from Pennsylvania. And then Io says, focus on buying talent and new equipment. Yeah, that'd be nice. And then he says he wants Jacob Fatu, who I think Jacob Fatu is going to WWE. He just seems like he's a fit there with this whole bloodline story. Now Tama Tonga is going there. Oh, that is right. I forgot to make fun of myself. My bad, guys. Did you see me go viral this week? Are you even on Twitter anymore?
No, I'm done with Twitter.
Yeah, so you totally axed your whole Twitter account, right? Because it is a pretty scummy company, but I just don't like new things, and so whenever I got the Blue Sky code, I just never activated it because I was like, I've been on Twitter since 2009. I just fear change.
Well, there you go. No, I'm off of Twitter, but Twitter things keep popping up. But no, I did not see you going viral about Tama Tonga on top of that.
Yeah. So the Wrestling Observer website, they posted basically a story that Tama Tonga has signed with has WWE. At least he's on his way to WWE. And I quote tweeted that and it said, "Suck it, Tony Khan." And a lot of people thought that was a serious post by me. I was owning Tony Khan. And I got I want to say, let me hold on. Let me see here. I want to say I got 200 quote tweets. Boy, they were dragging me pretty bad. And people were I even had some people coming to my defense. I was like, hold on, guys, let this play out. Let's see how this engagement, because I just started linking my podcast. So I started just linking the YouTube channel. I was like, yeah, let's see where this goes. But I'll show you guys. So yeah, so it was just a story about Tama Tonga. I said, "Suck it, Tony Khan," and this thing got 105. Looks like quote tweets. and 192,000 views and 75 replies, and a lot of people dragging me. Should we go to the quote tweets? Let's see what some of these geniuses stated here.
How many people told you rent's due?
Yeah, I think even people people were like bookmarking it, and then I think some people said that they do the whole lame like Tony's in your head rent free type of deal. That's the line. So
I think you have to click on view post engagements now.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And I don't use the platform anymore.
Yeah, so Tony Khan, call an ambulance. Let's see. Oh no, how can AEW and Tony Khan handle WWE retrieving Tama Tonga? If only they had top tier. Dude, that's the joke, bro.
That is the joke.
Thank you, Ibu, for coming to my aid. And then just a lot of people. Like, this was just going on and on and on. So guys, you guys all got worked, and I wasn't even trying to work anybody. That was just me making myself and like 3 other people laugh, and like for some reason it just kind of blew up.
I thought it was funny. I thought it was funny.
But all right, guys, we're gonna get to Hogan and Sting, 1997, and so I want to start off. So I was like a big Surfer Sting guy back in the day. Like that was my dude. And so Hogan comes in 1994, right? And he basically replaces Sting as the top babyface. Like, I know, like at the moment, like Ric Flair was the top babyface, but Ric Flair was always going to go back heel, and Sting was never going to go heel. So he comes in 94. He replaces Sting as the top babyface, and then Macho Man Randy Savage gets signed, and so now Sting's like number 3. And then like a year later, like Luger comes in, right? And so they lead into the Bash at the Beach with Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, and they're doing the whole NWO angle. And Sting was kind of like their backup plan if like Hogan didn't want to do it, and Hogan ends up doing it. But I just thought that the whole storyline was just tremendous. Like an amazing job by, got to give the guy credit, Bischoff and Nash and Hall and all those guys, for picking Sting to be the vigilante, because I would say this is his transition from Surfer Sting to the Crow Sting is the greatest character transition that I've ever seen in the history of pro wrestling. Like, I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. Like, outside of like a guy leaving a territory and going to get a mask and coming back, you know what I mean? Like this guy was in the same territory, puts on different face paint, and now he's a completely different character. He's wearing a different costume and the whole deal. Just him becoming like vigilante Dark Knight Sting, hanging in the rafters, and previously being Surfer Sting is like the greatest thing I've ever seen in wrestling.
The differentiation was so stark, right? Like you said, he goes from the colored face paint and the crew cut, the bleach blonde crew cut to what a lot of people associate Sting as, right, to begin with, right? A lot of people will just think of that immediately, and I mean, it was perfectly well done. And I don't think it would have been as successful if the core of the NWO wasn't so despised, and hated, because there was a legitimate contingent of wrestling fans who really hated the NWO and just for what it was bringing to the business and what it represented, even though it was a stroke of genius. And kudos to them realizing we need a hero. We need someone that the people will be able to relate to, that they'll be able to get behind, to try and topple the NWO. And I don't know how early or this was thought in the process of the NWO, but it had been a while. They were starting to talk about, NWO was going to take over. You remember they were buying airtime on WCW. You remember all this stuff.
Oh yeah.
And they were talking early on about we're taking over WCW. It's going to be our place. I feel like the seeds were sown very early in the process. Were they just there and thinking, well, we'll figure something out early. We'll figure something out down the line, which is entirely plausible. Or did they already have the plan of it's going to be Sting, right? And then isn't it Scott Hall who came up with the Crow idea? I think he's credited for that, right?
he is credited for that, and kudos to him for that. He's like, the famous line is like, Scott Hall tells Sting, he goes, "Have you ever seen The Crow?" And of course Sting is not going to watch The Crow, and he's like, look at the Crow. And speaking of which, they're doing a remake of The Crow. Can we just not, like, seriously? Are we gonna do, like, grunge Crow was cool, but do we need emo Crow? Like, we just had emo Batman with the guy from Twilight. I don't think we need this this new Crow. But anyway, so he says, look at the Crow, look at the makeup, and he goes, look, I'm not telling you to rip off Taker, but rip off Taker. And I never really looked at it as kind of like a rip off. They were darker characters, but I didn't think he was ripping off like the Undertaker. Very much was ripping off the Crow. But I thought it was so awesome because not only did he not identify with the NWO, right, but WCW, he felt, had turned their back on him because the NWO had they hired a fake Sting, a guy with Sting makeup, and it wasn't Barry Windham this time. It was, I think the guy, he went by Cobra, right, back in the day. So like they got the Cobra, who kind of looked a little bit like him, and to do an attack on WCW talent. And then so WCW thinks that like Sting is the guy. And he's like, guys, I've been here carrying the torch for this company. You hired this Hulk Hogan idiot who Ole Anderson knows is the shits, and to replace me. And Randy Savage comes in, knocks me down another peg. And then now you guys are believing that I have turned my back on WCW. Well, screw this noise. I'm going to go paint my face a different color and hang out in the rafters. And you guys can all eat shit.
No. And it's funny when you consider how it all ultimately played out. WCW turned their back on him again, but we'll get to that. But no, the transition was the transition was tremendous, and it got people excited. And honestly, like it kept breathing life into. It did two things. It kept breathing life into the NWO shtick because one could easily argue that once the Sting angle was done, things started to spiral, and it just it started getting really heavy-handed, and it kept Hulk Hogan relevant as the world champion. So Hogan was pretty happy about that for sure, right? Because of course everyone wanted to see Sting beat Hogan. You didn't want another WCW world champion. You didn't want Roddy Piper. You didn't want Kevin Nash. You didn't want anyone else. You wanted Hogan to hang on to that belt until Sting was ready to come and kick his face in.
Yeah, and I just love the mystery around him because there for a little bit of time, at least in like 96, like late night, like from like the summer of 96 all the way to the end of 96, you didn't really know exactly which way Sting was going because he would come down from the rafters. And I remember specifically, like he attacked like Rick Steiner, who was like a WCW babyface. And then I think he attacked Jeff Jarrett, which I think everybody's like, okay, yeah, you should attack Jeff Jarrett. But
everyone should attack Jeff Jarrett.
I think just at any time you should attack Jeff Jarrett. But like, he had attacked him, and then like there was a little bit of a feud there. They didn't have him wrestle. He just kind of just stuck up in the rafters, just being mysterious like all the time, and you never really knew where he was leaning until like that finally that moment hit where he comes down from the rafters and attacks the NWO, and the place just went insane.
And he takes out everyone, right? Only he takes out everyone, but it was perfectly built, I don't know if it was perfectly built because it was really it got really long. They stretched it out a lot, okay, he's in the rafters again, but once things started to heat up, it really got interesting. As it stands, I think inevitably it was, you're right, there was the aura of mystery, but I think inevitably you kind of saw where this was going nonetheless. He was going to be the protagonist. Hulk Hogan was going to be the antagonist here. We were heading towards this showdown inevitably, which didn't diminish, but that's the beauty of it, is that it didn't diminish the moment where he came down and just cleaned house, because the place exploded. Look, everyone loved Sting at that period. Like it was just insane. Everyone was wearing makeup. Little kids had Sting masks. Like it was just everyone, even people sending their Nitro party videos.
Did you ever do that?
Oh, hell no.
Okay. It's like, I probably, because I did have some of those, and I probably would have, but I was like super poor, and like there was usually only like one family in the neighborhood back then that had like a video camera in like the mid 90s. So like we just couldn't do that. But yeah, so he was like super popular with this new gimmick, but he never wrestled. And I think that's like part of the brilliance. Like I want to say from like July 96 to December 1997, he didn't have one single match. And he got the longer he didn't wrestle, the more over he got. And the less he didn't talk the entire time, which
he
was
didn't
another
say a word on top of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, even like he didn't say a word, even whenever he came down like a JJ Dillon. Right. And this was like, now we're like fast forwarding. We'll just ping pong around. We'll just talk about it. So I did have like a timeline set to go, but I'm just too excited. Sorry. But like, so like even in like 1997, right? Like before they get to they start their build for Starrcade, JJ Dillon is in the ring with Mean Gene Okerlund, and he's like, we need an answer, Sting. Like, what do you want? What is it that you want? You keep attacking our people. You're attacking NWO. Nobody knows what the hell you want. What exactly do you want? What do you want from me? What do you want from everybody? And then he doesn't come from the rafters. He actually just comes from the crowd, kind of like what John Moxley is doing now. And like people just see him, and the first moment they see him walking down the steps, the place just fucking erupts. Like you guys, like go back and Google this, guys. It's on YouTube. I was watching it earlier. There's like a playlist of the whole thing, and I was watching. I was like, God dang, they just explode. And he comes down, and I remember this like it was yesterday. He doesn't say a single word. He just grabs his bat, and like he grabs JJ, and he grabs his bat with the other hand. And then he points to a sign in the crowd that said Sting wants Hogan. And then JJ and Mean Gene look at it and they sell for it. Of course, like, oh my, whoa, what? He wants Hogan? Like they're like aghast that that's what he wants. Like, of course that's what he wants, you idiot. But like, he points and like the crowd starts going crazy saying, Sting wants Hogan, Sting wants Hogan. And then like he's pointing, there's like other signs in the crowd, which if they planted those signs, like kudos to you guys. Because it got me. But like, the longer he didn't talk, he never said anything. He points to a sign and boom, you got a pay-per-view. It's just fantastic.
I mean, again, it's all stuff you knew was going to happen, but the execution was really, really well done. And like you said, he didn't even have to say a word. He didn't have to add anything. He just pointed at the sign and that was that. And then everything sort of falls into place, and you construct I'm sure even Mike back then had his great booking ideas that he wanted to send over to Eric Bischoff, right? Yeah. But I think we all had the same idea at that point, right? We all had the same outcome in mind. We all, we all saw the trajectory leading into Starrcade and eventually at Starrcade, biggest match in WCW history in years, but it wouldn't quite go that way either.
Yeah. So they're building to the match, and I do want to talk about Starrcade. So when we before we get to the match, I just want to talk about a couple of my favorite moments just from like the road to getting there. I really loved it whenever Sting the NWO commissions like their own like fake Sting to come down from the rafters, and it was like a dummy and like falls from the rafter and like they beat it up and stuff, and then Sting's like hiding in the crowd. Some of my favorite moments ever from Sting is when he's hiding in the crowd with a Sting mask on, and then he takes the mask off and it's Sting. Like so like yeah, those are just some of my favorite moments. But yeah, so we get to I was trying to pull up the stats. I think I had the stats at one point, but we get to the MCI Center in Washington DC, and I think they did, I want to say like close to like 20,000 people in there, and I know they sold over, I want to say over 700,000 pay-per-views for that, which is tremendous for what WCW was doing at the time. I'm pretty sure it ended up being like their biggest pay-per-view of all time, right?
Yes, I do believe you are correct. They did tremendous business.
Yeah. So it really is the biggest pay-per-view match that in the history of WCW. And Sting arrives to the building that day thinking he's going to win. Everybody that bought that pay-per-view, and I bought the pay-per-view, all of my friends bought the pay-per-view. We all bought that pay-per-view thinking that Sting was going to win, that Sting was going to defeat Hogan. So they get to the match, or before they get to the match, Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan take a look at Sting and they're like, "Hey, brother, this guy didn't have a tan. Like, he's supposed to be from Venice. The Dark Knight, hanging in the rafters, doesn't have a tan, brother. I don't know if he's ready to do this thing. I don't think this works for me, brother. I think I need the belt for a little while longer." Could you imagine tanking your entire company because your top babyface isn't tan?
Bischoff has tried he's tried to walk that back a little bit, the tan thing, where he was like, well, not just the tan, he wasn't working out, he didn't look jacked, he wasn't. Sting wrestled, he wrestled in a, one of these body tops, whatever sleeveless tops,
Right.
And his arms looked fine. Like, no, he wasn't juiced out to the max, but his arms looked fine. He didn't look out of shape. He wasn't sporting a beer belly, and Sting wrestled in that gear for the entirety of the rest of his WCW career. I don't think he ever went bare chested after that. Right.
I think in TNA for like one match he did. I think he did for one match. But no, he never really like full time ever. But he never really looked like he was out of shape either.
No, it's look, anyway, this, it's a sidebar beside the point that, at some point Bischoff started, when he became the object of ridicule, when he said on his podcast that he didn't give the main event to Sting because he didn't have a tan. He started to retcon that a bit as well. There wasn't just that. And then other things happened during that meeting that, well, I'm not going to talk about them because Sting said them. And if Sting has never talked about them publicly, well, it's not my place to say. So we're going to leave it there. But me and Hulk, who's the fucking booker here? Who's the guy here? Right. Bischoff should have put on his big boy pants and just realized why everyone was buying the pay-per-view, why he sold 20,000 tickets, and just do the right thing instead of coming up with this convoluted finish, which got even more convoluted because something else happened during the finish that no one's quite sure about, and just completely tainted the moment that was supposed to be like the ascension, finishing the story.
Yes. No, I'm glad you brought that up, and I think we'll get to that point in a second. That's a good point, actually. I think there are some parallels to it. So we finally get to the match, the main event, the biggest match of all time, and then I want to say it was like it had to, and you guys can correct me in the chat if you remember it better than me. I did just recently watch it, but it was like 8 minutes into the match where Hogan hits the leg drop and gets the 1, 2, 3 on Sting, and Nick Patrick does like a regular count when he was supposed, like the plan was he was going to do a fast count because he was the heel ref, right? And he ends up just doing a regular count, and it was like super, and like everybody's like looking like, what the hell's going on? It's such bullshit. Like like booing everywhere, people going crazy. And then they bring in Bret Hart, right? Fresh off of Montreal, the biggest story in all of wrestling, right? Like him punching out Vince McMahon, getting screwed over a month earlier on Survivor Series in Montreal. So WCW has him now, who could possibly become their biggest babyface if they play their cards right. Or maybe like a good, like solid number 2 behind Sting if they didn't screw this up. So
spoiler alert, he didn't.
Yeah.
He didn't.
So they bring him out and he punches Nick Patrick for doing a regular count. Like he did like his actual job. Like he didn't do anything heelish. So he punches him out, he comes into the ring, and then Sting ends up getting the Scorpion Deathlock on him, and then Bret Hart calls for the finish. And it was like maybe 15 minutes total. It was like the biggest pay-per-view of all time. They did nothing in the match. The whole thing was crap. Sucked the air out of the building, and one of the most horrendous finishes to a pay-per-view that I have ever seen.
Absolutely terrible. What was laughable in the whole thing is that the rest of the show, or of that match, I should say, played out as if Nick Patrick did the fast count, but he didn't, right? Because the idea was he does the fast count, calls for the bell, Bret Hart stops the timekeeper from ringing the bell, and he says in the microphone, "This is not happening again." He's directly referencing the screw job. He says, "I'm not letting this happen again." So he's but there's nothing to there's no screw job. There's nothing to not let happen again. Nick Patrick called it down the line and did a regular 3 count, and Sting didn't kick out. That's just how it goes. And this is part of the story where, no one's quite sure exactly what happened, because they were supposed to do the fast count, but someone told Nick Patrick, after everyone agreed on the finish, to not do a fast count. We can all assume who.
Right. Did Nick Patrick ever come out and say that it was Hogan?
He was on it. He did. I think it was Dave Penzer had a podcast for a while, and didn't they all? And he was on it, and they talked about it, and Nick Patrick said, "Look, I have the boss telling me one thing, and then I have one of the top guys," and he didn't say the top guy, right? He didn't, but I have one of the top guys telling me something else. What am I supposed to do? Kind of thing. Yeah, like I'm paraphrasing his entire, I'm shortening it, TLDR here, but that's essentially what it was. The boss is telling me one thing, but then one of the top guys is telling me something else. What am I supposed to do? Kind of thing. So, we can all assume who made the call.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable assumption that it was Hogan that made the call, and that single call that he made was the catalyst to tanking the rest of Sting's run in WCW, because he was never the same. No. And then Bret never got off the ground. And then honestly, shortly after that, I think that was the beginning of the end for WCW. And I know a lot of people point to like Goldberg losing. A lot of people point to the finger poke of doom. In my opinion, this is when we all started like losing consumer confidence in WCW. Because like the booking just got I don't want to say they lucked into Goldberg, because I think they worked really hard on making Goldberg. And I think a lot of people put a lot of effort into making Goldberg, and he was awesome. Goldberg really, in 1998, his ascension really kind of slowed the decline down. But then once he cooled off, it was completely over. And it was because the beginning of the end was Hogan and Sting in Starrcade 97.
I agree. I completely agree. And, I think because I agree with you at the same time that from this point on, Sting was never quite the same. But I think that the nail in the coffin, the true nail in the coffin, was the following night on Nitro when they redid the match. Do we have time to talk about this real quick?
Dude, we got all the time. Dude, I'm in Hawaii. It's not even 8:00 right now.
No, but I don't want you to go into flagship territory here. But the real impetus, I think, to Sting never really recovering from all of this is on the next night they decide to do the redo on Nitro. Right? They do this whole thing with J.J. Dillon and the executive committee, and Sting is doing an open challenge, and it's Hogan who accepts, and they do the whole thing, right? And they redo the match, which cuts off. Right? You never see the finish of the match, but they air the finish of the match on the debuting Thunder, WCW Thunder, that was debuting that week. So a lot of people were really mad and wrote to to Turner to let them know the displeasure of not seeing the finish of the match. But a lot of people then are like, oh, this is a promotional tactic to get people to watch Thunder ultimately, right? Both things, it makes sense to me. So when you tune in on Thunder to see how everything happened, now, if memory serves me right here, it is not Nick Patrick who is the official referee, but I don't remember who, but it was not Nick Patrick. But during the match, the referee there's a ref bump, and then Nick Patrick runs in to do a count on a roll up or whatever, and he does a fast count.
Yeah.
Now he does the fucking fast count.
He does what he's supposed to do from the night before.
Yeah, exactly. He does the fucking fast count.
Yeah.
So Hogan starts celebrating, but then but then the other referee wakes up and he's like, "No, I'm the referee." So the match continues. I could only imagine someone in the audience not hearing commentary, not hearing Shivani and trying to make sense of this. Everyone's confused in the audience. The match continues. Sting wins the match with the other referee, with the original official, and then J.J. Dillon doesn't know what to do, right? But anyway, so then after they do that, they have Hogan come to the ring because J.J. Dillon has this announcement that he has to make, and it breaks his heart. It's something that churns his stomach. It's got him inside out. And he brings Hogan to the ring, who thinks he's going to get the title. He brings Sting out, and he says that, because of what happened with the double countouts and all the double decisions, I have to vacate the title.
Yeah,
and he asks Sting to give over the title, and Sting is pissed, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like none. So I think from that point on, that's where, like you said, I think that's the perfect terminology. Consumer confidence started to dip because you're like, well, what the fuck? We just spent months getting excited for Sting's title run, and now you're just yanking it away for no apparent reason.
Well, and then so they get the sold out 98, and guys, I this is not hyperbole. Sold Out 98 is one of the greatest pay-per-views the WCW ever put on. It's a very underrated show. Bret Hart versus Ric Flair, like Savage and Luger, Chris Benoit versus Raven, like just tons of awesome matches. So, but in the middle of that show, they bring out Roddy Piper and they bring out Sting and they bring out Hogan to like make the announcement, like, okay, the title's been vacated. Now what are we going to do about it? And then they make the match for the following month of February. It's Super Brawl 98. And so we get there. I was like, okay, we're finally going to get a conclusion to this Hogan and Sting feud. And they get to Super Brawl 98 and they're stinking the joint out. And
it's a terrible
Sting
match.
It's terrible
It's
match.
a terrible match.
And Sting eventually wins, but because it's Hogan, he cannot win clean. Your ultimate babyface cannot vanquish the villain clean because Randy Savage has to be the star of the match and come in and hit. I think he hit Hogan with a spray can. Do I remember that right? It was like a spray can or something like
so.
that.
Yeah.
He attacked Hogan with a spray can, and then Sting eventually finally defeats Hogan and is now the world champion after in the third match. Just what a complete shit show that whole company was.
And honestly, all of this could have been prevented if they had just given Sting the title clean without any bullshit at Starrcade. And honestly, it probably would have saved Starrcade because Starrcade 97 is a bad wrestling show on top of it all. It's not a good show.
Yeah. Yeah. And so Sting ends up winning the title at Super Brawl. And then he goes on to have a 2-month reign. And he loses the title. It does spring. Didn't he lose it at Spring Stampede? Did he lose it to God? You know what? Hold on. I got to look that up. When does Sting lose the title? If you guys are in the chat, you guys can see it. So Sting loses title 1998. Let's see. I think he loses it. Let's see. How did Sting manage to have the worst WCW title reign ever? So let's see. He won it in in Super Brawl. God, you know, I'm on one of these articles where it takes you fucking forever to get to the conclusion.
Let me see here.
Let's see. I can't. I think I want to say he lost to Savage in like April. Sorry guys, this is bad radio. I should have really been prepared for this. Is that?
Hang on, I'm helping.
Yeah.
I'm helping. He did. Yeah, you are correct. It was at Spring Stampede, and he lost it to Savage.
Okay, Spring Stampede, Macho Man Randy. So he ends up holding the title for just 2 months, and then drops it right back to Savage. Savage, who helped him win the title, and was obviously a Hogan crony. Like, I think this whole thing was because like Hogan felt threatened by Sting, because Sting had become bigger than him. You know, from like 96 through 97, he was the bigger deal. And Hogan just couldn't take it, and so he had to tank Sting's career, and it took a long time for him to recover from that.
It took a tremendous amount of time. I would even argue that he kind of needed TNA to refine some kind of footing and just find some love in doing pro wrestling again. You know, a lot of people like to make fun of Joker Sting, but he was having a blast doing Joker Sting. Like. Hey, you could tell.
If anybody wants to make fun of Joker Sting in front of me, we're fighting like on site. Because you know the summer of 2011 is always going to be remembered as like the summer of punk. But there was something else happening in pro wrestling at the time that I thought was pretty damn good, and that was Joker Sting, and Joker going crazy on Eric Bischoff and then Hulk Hogan and his crew Immortal, all the way into Bound for Glory 2011, where he ends up having Hulk Hogan's last wrestling match. And like the last time Hulk Hogan, like, you know, bled in a match and got a big pop, like the match itself was the shits, but the after match with Hogan turning back babyface and like the two guys embracing was pretty fun to watch. So I thought Joker Sting ruled.
Yeah. I thought he had a blast. He was having a blast doing it. But I mean, listen, you know, I mentioned it jokingly, you know, using the finishing the story terminology, but this is, you know, there's some interesting parallels that you can draw here, patterns that you could easily fall back into in, let's say, in modern day WWE right now, because it, you know, look, the parallels are there. I think they're there, and a huge mistake was made back in 1997 with the decisions that they made, not only at Starrcade, but in the days that followed as well. And it all started to fall apart. You know, I'm not saying here that if, you know, that because Cody Rhodes didn't win at WrestleMania last year, that WWE is destined to fall apart as well. That's definitely not what I'm saying. But you can only drag your fan base along so long before they ultimately do turn on you and they say, okay, well, this is nonsense. What are we doing? I mean, we already got a taste of it. They want us to believe that that Cody versus Roman was the plan all along and that The Rock was just going to be there. They want us to believe that's what it was, but that was not the case. They've been trying to do Rock versus Roman for the past 3 years.
Yeah, well, and as Joe Lanza will tell you, and he's spot on. The Bloodline story was always, the conclusion was Rock versus Roman, like that, like from the beginning. And Cody was just kind of like a side part of the story. You know, finishing the story, I think is very appropriate. You know, Sting not winning at Starrcade 97 was way worse, I would say, because that was like a colossal failure that ultimately springboarded the end of WCW. Sure. I felt like Cody losing at WrestleMania could have been very, very bad. The difference was, I think they could have tanked Cody's career, but fortunately for them, they were able to kind of regain some steam, and now he seems to be hot again going back into this Mania. And they're a more competently ran company than WCW was at the time. So like they're more of like a corporation versus WCW was like was being ran by It was a zoo. It was being ran by Bischoff. It was being worked by all the top stars. Everybody was like overpaid, and they stopped drawing because the booking was so incompetent. So there were a lot of things that contributed to the death of WCW. I just think that Sting losing to Hogan and Starrcade was kind of like that first. He's the Gavrilo Princip. You know what I mean? Like you brought up Franz Ferdinand. Like Gavrilo Princip, killing Franz Ferdinand was like the catalyst that started the First World War. But there was a lot of things going on at the time that ultimately contributed to it, right? So I think this might be like that moment that we're talking about. And it's not the first time I've used that parallel. So I know people are going to be like, Mike, you keep talking about Gavrilo Princip. I know, I love that story. Sorry. But but very much like it was like one aspect of it, but it was probably the most significant aspect that there was.
Yeah. There's a lot of, again, there was a lot of stuff going on, and there's a lot of very poor decisions that were made after that on top of it. But this was definitely an impetus. This was a spark. It was a terrible decision that capped off a terrible show. And the next few days were just absolutely ridiculous. And I mean, Sting, for everything that he gave to the company, I'm with you. It's a shame that he ended up his tenure ended up like this because one man was afraid to share a spotlight, to not go quietly unto the night, who still thought that he had something to give when all he would do is take. And unfortunately, Sting was a casualty of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you said that beautifully. We've often said here that Sting's greatest rivalry was with the WCW booking and WCW politics. He had to deal with it with Ole Anderson. He had to deal with it with a little bit with Flair, with Hogan, with Bischoff. I think TNA always did a pretty good job with Sting. I think some of the storylines are a bit kooky and wonky. I was never a fan of the Abyss one. But I always felt like they treated him with reverence. Not on his way out, though. His way out of TNA, like him, like losing to Nick Aldis and they kind of cast him aside. But God bless Tony Khan and AEW for the job that they have done with this the last few years with Sting in the company, and the big send off that we're going to get to see on Sunday night in Greensboro with Revolution. Main event, Young Bucks versus Sting and Darby Allin. I am so stoked for it. I think they just did a tremendous job. Sting finally got treated the way he always was meant to be treated, right? Like with reverence. They treat him like a legend, like he is an icon. He's always being held up on a pedestal every time he's on the television show. So I just think that they've just done a tremendous job all around. And
he has to. It goes both ways, right? He has to. There's an entire generation of wrestling fans who've never seen a Sting match in their life, right? You and me were the old guard, but a lot of wrestling fans these days had no idea who this guy was. His matches would always over deliver every single time. His promos, everything he did was spot on. Even in AEW itself, he's worked to deserve this send off, regardless of his, or on top of his career, of his legendary career. Even what he's done here in AEW has warranted that. So, might be there might be a tier or two in Quebec City and in Hawaii on Sunday.
Yeah, I think there will be. Warren, I really, really greatly appreciate you. Added so much to this show. Thank you so much for being on the podcast this week. JD, God bless you. God bless the Oliva family. I know you guys are going through a lot. So we just hang in there, buddy, and we'll hope to see you soon. Hey, Warren, let's get some plugs before we sign off here, man.
Well, I do the Mr. Warren Hayes show, which, like Mike mentioned at the start of the show, you can follow on youtube.com/Mr. Warren Hayes or on your favorite podcast application right now. Like I said, there hasn't been any new content recently. But I'm slowly getting back into, as much as you were thanking me to be on the show. I'm truly appreciative of you inviting me. I love what you and JD do. And on top of that, it's allowing me to dip my toes in and see how medically I can put up with this. So it all.
I'm no doctor, but I am a fan, and I could, your performance tonight, I'd say you're ready, brother. And I think we need to hear your voice back in the space.
I think so. So it'll be a question of a week, a few days, maybe, and I'll be back. YouTube.com/Mr. Warren Hayes. Subscribe there, or follow me on your favorite podcast application. I'm also on the blue sky at Mr. Warren Hayes, or you can also join the Discord, the Mr. Warren Hayes Show Discord. If you go to any of my socials and whatnot, the link is in the description for the Discord. Trust me, not anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Go, and you can interact with Warren there with all his great fans there on the Discord. Speaking of Discord, the Voices of Wrestling Discord, you can interact with me over there on the Mike and JD Show thread or the TNA thread. I'm in there arguing with people all the time, so come join us over there on the Voices of Wrestling Discord. Make sure you go to patreon.com/the Mike and JD Show if you like this content. I will be back this weekend with an AEW Revolution review. I might even go live right after the show. It depends on the schedule. Sunday nights are tough in the Gilbert household, but I am going to try to make this thing happen. So, and I'm going to do that strictly for Patreon. So patreon.com/the Mike and JD Show. Plus, I'm going to have Brace for Impact coming out this weekend. I'm one of the only idiots in the world that has an Impact podcast or a TNA podcast. And I love my TNA podcast, and I love the fans of that show. So thank you guys for being here. I really do appreciate you. We appreciate you, Warren, JD. God bless you. And until next time, mahalo.
Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you watch your A game. Ain't made no rain from the track when we unite and spit. This isn't A game, better bring your A game. Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you watch your A game. Ain't made no rain from the track when we.
All right, we did it. Ooh, man, that was a good show, man. Thank you so much, dude. I really appreciate that.
This was a lot of fun, and thank you so much for having me on. Honestly, this was great, and I really like what you and JD do. I really do. So
man, that means a lot.
I was very excited for you to. I was very excited when you sent out the invitation. I was like, hell yeah, we're doing it. Yeah, sure, let's go.
I don't know if you noticed, but halfway through the show, my Google Docs crashed on me, and I lost all my notes.
No, I did really. You just
yeah. So I was like forgetting stuff, and then I was like trying to find like my notes on the Sting stuff. So I started Googling. I was like, shit. So you saved me because you had some of those details off the top of your head. So I do appreciate that.
Hey, no, awesome. That's fantastic. No, look, if anything, it didn't come across as a glitch. No, everything worked out fine, I think.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks a lot. Get some rest, man. I know it's where are you at? You're in Montreal?
Quebec City, which is about 2.5 hours out of Montreal.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, get some rest. I know you're on the Eastern time zone there. I'm gonna download this and get it over to Rich and Joe, so that way they have it fresh for the Friday morning rush, as they like to call it. So
there you go. Well, thank you again. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it, and I'll reciprocate. Trust me.
Absolutely, and you're welcome anytime, man. If you ever need me to hop on your show, just shout.
Will do. Thank you so much, man. Have a great rest of your evening.
Yes, sir. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello, do you like New Japan Pro Wrestling? Are you a Shin Nihon freak? If so, check out the Super J-Cast with Joel and Damon on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.
And even if you fucking hate New Japan Pro Wrestling, listen to the Super J-Cast anyway. Not just for our great show reviews, analysis, and pastrami sandwiches, but there's also usually some dick jokes somewhere in the obligatory opening 30 minutes of absolute nonsense we chat about every single week. That's the Super J-Cast for all the best talk about New Japan Pro Wrestling, crisps, and pornography.